Sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one who never raises his voice. The bass from the nightclub speakers vibrated through the floor beneath my heels while rain streaked down the neon windows overlooking downtown Manhattan. Friday nights at Eclipse were usually loud enough to drown out bad memories, but that night, nothing could silence the feeling crawling beneath my skin. I noticed Tyler the second I walked in. He sat alone at the far end of the bar with a whiskey glass in his hand, watching me the way storm clouds watch the ocean before everything goes wrong. My stomach tightened instantly. I hadn't seen him in 3 months. 3 months since I packed my camera gear, left our apartment in Brooklyn, and blocked his number after realizing apologies meant nothing when they came attached to manipulation. But Tyler never handled rejection well. Especially not public rejection. "Claire, are you even listening?" my friend Madison laughed beside me from the crowded booth. "You've checked the bar like 10 times. I forced a smile and reached for my drink. "I'm listening." I wasn't. Because Tyler's eyes never left me. Even across a packed club, I could feel it. That heavy stare. Possessive. Angry. Familiar in all the worst ways. My phone buzzed against the table. Unknown number. I already knew it was him before I opened the message. "You really thought you could ignore me forever?" My pulse stumbled. Outside, thunder rolled across the city skyline, low and distant, like a warning crawling through Manhattan. Madison leaned closer. "Claire. I'm fine." The lie tasted bitter. Tyler stood from the bar. Slowly. Deliberately. Like he wanted me to notice every step. My chest tightened hard enough to steal air from my lungs. I looked toward the exit automatically, calculating distance the way women do when they've spent too much time learning how to avoid conflict without making it obvious. Too crowded. Too far. Tyler adjusted the sleeves of his gray jacket and started walking toward me through the sea of bodies under flashing blue lights. And that was when I saw him. He sat alone in the VIP section near the back of the club, one hand resting beside a crystal glass untouched for nearly 20 minutes. Black suit. Black tie loosened slightly at the collar. Dark hair swept neatly away from a face too calm for a place this chaotic. He wasn't looking at the dancers. Wasn't checking his phone. He was watching the room like he owned it. Like none of this noise could touch him. 2 men stood near the hallway behind him pretending not to guard him. Nobody approached his table. Nobody even looked directly at him for long. I don't know what possessed me. Fear maybe. Desperation. Survival instinct. But before I could talk myself out of it, I stood from the booth and walked straight toward him. My heels clicked against the polished black floor while my heartbeat pounded louder than the music. The closer I got, the quieter the world felt somehow. Like the air itself changed around him. He finally looked up at me when I stopped beside his table. God. His eyes were darker than I expected. Calm. Sharp. Dangerous in the quietest way possible. "Could you dance with me?" I asked softly, trying not to let my voice shake. "My ex is watching from the bar." For one long second, he just stared at me. Not confused. Not surprised. Like he'd already decided something about me before I even opened my mouth. Then his gaze shifted briefly past my shoulder toward Tyler approaching through the crowd. The corner of his jaw tightened almost invisibly. He stood without saying a word. And somehow, the entire room noticed. The man moved toward me with the kind of calm that made everyone else step aside without being told. The music still thundered through the club, glasses still clinked behind the bar, people still laughed beneath the flashing lights, but around him, something shifted. Like the room itself understood who he was before I did. His hand settled lightly against the middle of my back as he guided me toward the dance floor. Warm. Steady. Controlled. Not possessive like Tyler had always been. Protective. The difference hit me harder than I expected. Look at me, he said quietly once we reached the center of the crowd. His voice was low enough that only I could hear it over the music. I blinked up at him. What? If you keep watching your ex, he wins. My cheeks warmed instantly. Embarrassment maybe. Or the unsettling realization that this stranger had read me perfectly in less than 30 seconds. I forced myself to focus on him instead. Big mistake. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Tall enough that I barely reached his shoulder in heels. Broad shoulders beneath perfectly tailored black fabric. A silver watch caught flashes of blue light whenever he moved his hand against my waist. Expensive. Everything about him looked expensive. But it was his eyes that unsettled me most. Dark brown. Calm. Patient. The kind of eyes that looked like they had seen terrible things and survived them without losing sleep. Thank you, I said softly. You did not have to help me. I know. Somehow that answer made my pulse skip harder. Around us, people danced shoulder to shoulder beneath spinning lights while rain tapped against the massive windows overlooking Lexington Avenue. Manhattan blurred outside in silver and neon. Inside, his attention never drifted from me once. Not even for a second. Does he usually follow you? He asked. The question caught me off guard. Sometimes. His jaw tightened slightly. And tonight? I hesitated. Tonight he has been texting me for over an hour. He nodded once like he had expected that answer. No shock. No sympathy performance. Just quiet understanding that somehow felt more comforting than fake reassurance ever could. His fingers adjusted slightly against my back when another couple bumped into us near the edge of the dance floor. Small movement. Careful movement. Like he was aware of every inch of space around me. You are shaking, he said. I am not. One dark eyebrow lifted. You are. I looked away first. Because he was right. My hands were trembling slightly, and I hated that he noticed. Hated even more that part of me felt safer because he did. The song changed overhead. Slower this time. Softer bass. More piano. Somewhere near the bar, glasses shattered suddenly followed by nervous laughter, but nobody around us reacted much. Nobody except the two men standing near the VIP hallway. Both wore dark suits with wires disappearing behind their collars. Security. Definitely security. One of them scanned the room continuously while the other kept glancing toward the man holding me like he was waiting for instructions that never came. My stomach tightened. Who are you? I asked before I could stop myself. For the first time since we started dancing, something almost resembling amusement touched the corner of his mouth. Someone your ex should stay away from. Before I could respond, movement over his shoulder caught my attention. Tyler was pushing through the crowd toward us faster now, his face flushed red beneath the club lights. Angry. Drunk. Determined. My heartbeat stumbled hard enough to make breathing difficult again. Instinctively, my fingers tightened slightly against the stranger's sleeve. He noticed immediately. Of course he did. His eyes shifted past me toward Tyler approaching through the dancers. The warmth disappeared from his expression so fast it sent cold racing down my spine. Not anger exactly. Something quieter. More dangerous. Tyler stopped a few feet away from us, jaw clenched hard. Claire, he snapped over the music. What the hell are you doing? The stranger beside me did not even look bothered. He simply slid one arm slightly more securely around my waist and answered before I could speak. She is dancing. And somehow, hearing him say it made Tyler go pale. The tension between them spread through the dance floor faster than the music. People nearby started drifting away without understanding why, instinctively creating space around us like animals sensing an approaching storm. Tyler looked furious. The stranger holding me looked calm enough to order coffee. Somehow, that scared me more. Claire, Tyler snapped again, forcing a laugh that sounded strained. Come on. We are leaving. I opened my mouth, but the man beside me spoke first. I do not think she wants to. His voice stayed low and even, but Tyler's expression changed instantly. I felt it before I understood it. Fear. Real fear. Tyler straightened slightly, trying to recover whatever pride he still had left. This is between me and my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, I corrected automatically. Tyler ignored me completely. His eyes stayed locked on the man beside me now. I do not know who you think you are, but this does not concern you. A slow silence settled between them while blue light flashed across polished marble floors and rain battered the windows harder outside. The stranger finally turned fully toward Tyler for the first time. You are making her uncomfortable. That was it. No threat. No raised voice. Just a statement. But the air around us changed immediately. Tyler noticed it too. I could tell by the way his shoulders stiffened. By the sudden flicker of hesitation in his eyes. The two security men near the hallway had shifted closer without me noticing. One stood near the edge of the dance floor now, speaking quietly into an earpiece while watching Tyler carefully. My pulse started climbing again. Claire, Tyler said more carefully this time. You seriously do not know who this guy is, do you? The stranger's hand remained steady against my waist. Warm. Grounding. Tyler, I said quietly, please just leave. He stared at me like I had slapped him. You are choosing this? I am choosing peace. For a second, I thought he might argue again. Then his eyes flicked past me toward the men watching from nearby. Toward the bartender suddenly pretending not to look in our direction. Toward the club manager standing completely still near the entrance with the expression of someone praying a problem disappears before it gets expensive. Tyler swallowed hard. You have no idea what kind of people you are around, he muttered. The stranger beside me almost smiled at that. Almost. Actually, he said softly, she is starting to. Tyler took one slow step backward. Then another. He pointed at me once like he wanted to say something else, but whatever thought crossed his mind died before reaching his mouth. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the crowd toward the exit. I released a breath I did not realize I had been holding. The music suddenly felt loud again. My knees weak. My hands cold. Are you all right? The stranger asked. I nodded too quickly. Yes. His eyes lowered briefly to my shaking fingers resting against his sleeve. You are still trembling. That seems to happen around you. The words slipped out before I could stop them. For the first time, a genuine smile touched his face. Small. Dangerous. Beautiful enough to make my stomach twist unexpectedly. That is probably smart. I should have walked away right then. Any sensible woman would have thanked him and left the club immediately. But instead, I stayed exactly where I was while rain rolled down the windows behind him like silver rivers beneath Manhattan lights. Who are you? I asked again more quietly this time. He studied me for a long moment before answering. Damien. Just Damien. No last name. No explanation. Yet somehow the entire room reacted to that single word. The bartender dropped a glass behind the counter. One of the security men looked away instantly. Even the club owner lowered his head slightly when Damien glanced toward the bar. My chest tightened slowly. Because suddenly I understood something terrifying. The room was not afraid of a fight happening tonight. The room was afraid of him. And somehow, he was still holding me like I was something fragile. Damien released me slowly when the song ended, but somehow the warmth of his hand lingered against my waist long after the music faded into another heavy bass line. Around us, the club returned to normal piece by piece. Conversations resumed. Laughter echoed near the bar. Waitresses carrying glowing bottles moved through the crowd again beneath blue neon lights. But people still avoided getting too close to him. I noticed it now. Really noticed it. The careful distance. The lowered eyes. The way security staff watched him before watching anyone else. "You should sit down," Damien said quietly. "You look overwhelmed." I let out a nervous laugh. That obvious? Only to me. The answer landed somewhere dangerous beneath my ribs. He guided me back toward the VIP section with one hand resting lightly against my back while the two security men repositioned themselves nearby like shadows following his movements. Up close, the private section looked less like nightclub seating and more like a luxury hotel lounge hidden inside chaos. Black leather couches. Marble tables. Crystal glasses untouched beside. Expensive bottles I could never afford. Manhattan glittered outside the towering windows behind us while rain blurred the skyline into streaks of silver and gold. Damien sat across from me instead of beside me. Somehow that felt intentional. Respectful. Like he understood I needed space to breathe again. A waitress appeared instantly beside the table. "Another drink for the lady," she asked carefully without fully looking at him. "Water," Damien answered before I could speak. The waitress nodded immediately and disappeared. "You always order for strangers?" I asked. "Only the ones having panic attacks." Heat rushed into my cheeks. "I am not having a panic attack." His dark eyes stayed on mine calmly. "You have checked the exits 12 times in the last 10 minutes. I froze. Because he was right again. He noticed everything. Damien leaned back slightly against the leather seat while thunder rolled faintly outside. "Your ex enjoys control," he said. "Men like that do not like being ignored." The simplicity of his voice made the truth sting more. "You sound like you know a lot about men like that." A flicker crossed his face. Gone almost instantly. "I know enough." The waitress returned with bottled water and placed it carefully in front of me with shaking hands. Actually shaking. I watched her hurry away afterward like staying near our table too long might cost her something. My stomach tightened slowly. "Okay," I whispered, twisting the cold bottle cap nervously. "I have to ask." Damien said nothing. "Why is everyone here terrified of you?" Silence stretched between us while music pounded softly beneath the floor. For the first time since meeting him, Damien looked almost tired. Not physically tired. Something deeper. Older. "Fear is useful in my world," he answered finally. Not an explanation. Barely even an answer. Yet somehow it felt honest. I stared at him beneath the dim club lighting, trying to make sense of the contradiction sitting across from me. He looked dangerous. Everyone reacted to him like he was dangerous. But for the last 20 minutes, he had spoken to me more gently than Tyler had in the final year of our relationship. My phone buzzed. Suddenly against the marble table. Unknown number again. My chest tightened instantly. Damien noticed the change in my expression before I even touched the screen. "Read it," he said quietly. I hesitated before unlocking the message. "You think this guy can protect you?" Cold spread through my stomach. Another message arrived immediately after. "You should leave before you get involved in something ugly." Damien watched my face carefully while thunder cracked louder outside the windows. "Tyler?" he asked. I nodded slowly. He held out his hand toward the phone. "May I?" For some reason, I gave it to him. Damien read the messages once. Expression unreadable. Then he placed the phone back onto the table with terrifying calm. "You will not answer him tonight." That was not a question, was it? A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth again. No, somewhere near the entrance, the club manager suddenly rushed forward to greet someone arriving through the rain. Damien glanced briefly toward the door before his eyes returned to mine. "Claire," he said softly for the first time, and hearing my name in his voice did something unsettling to my heartbeat. "Do you trust me enough to let my driver take you home tonight?" The question stayed suspended between us while rain hammered against the windows hard enough to blur the city lights outside into streaks of white and gold. Trust him? I barely knew him. 30 minutes ago he had been a stranger sitting alone in a nightclub while I tried not to fall apart over my ex-boyfriend. And yet somehow, sitting across from Damien felt safer than going home alone. That realization should have terrified me more than it did. "You do not even know where I live," I said quietly. "I know enough." There was no arrogance in his voice. Just certainty. The kind that made my pulse nervous for reasons I did not fully understand. I stared down at the unopened bottle of water between my hands. "You always this controlling?" Damien leaned back slightly, one arm resting against the leather couch while soft blue light slid across the sharp line of his jaw. "Only when I think someone is in danger." "And you think I am?" His eyes held mine steadily. "Yes." The honesty in that single word knocked the air from my lungs. Because Tyler had spent the last year convincing me I overreacted to everything. That I was dramatic. Emotional. Too sensitive. But Damien looked at me like my fear made perfect sense. Like he saw every nervous glance toward the exits and understood exactly where it came from. "Claire," he said more softly this time, "men who send messages like that do not enjoy losing control." My phone buzzed again against the table before I could answer. Another message from Tyler. I did not even need to open it. Damien glanced toward the screen but did not reach for it this time. "You do not have to read it." I swallowed hard. I spent 2 years trying to avoid making him angry. And did it work? The silence after that answer felt painfully loud. No. It never worked. Tyler always found something to blame me for eventually. The way I dressed. The people I talked to. The jobs I accepted. The nights I worked late editing photography projects. Somehow every argument circled back to me being difficult for wanting independence. Damien studied me quietly while thunder rolled again over Manhattan. "You apologize too much," he said suddenly. "What?" "Every sentence tonight has sounded like you are asking permission to exist." Heat climbed into my face. Embarrassment mixed with something sharper because deep down, I knew he was right. I looked away toward the dance floor where strangers laughed beneath flashing lights completely unaware that my entire night had shifted off balance. "You notice everything, do not you?" Damien's expression barely changed. "I notice what matters." The answer settled heavily in my chest. Before I could respond, one of the security men approached the table quietly. Tall. Broad shoulders beneath a charcoal suit. "Sir," he said carefully, "the car is ready." "Sir." Not Mr. Not boss. "Sir." Damien nodded once without looking away from me. "Thank you, Marco." The man stepped back immediately. I watched the interaction carefully. The respect in Marco's posture did not feel forced. It felt absolute. Like Damien's authority existed naturally around him the way gravity exists around planets. My stomach tightened slowly again. "Who are you really?" I whispered. Damien was silent for a moment. Then he stood smoothly from the couch and held out his hand toward me. "Someone who does not want Tyler Grant near you again." Hearing my ex's full name in his voice made cold race through me instantly. "How do you know his last name?" Damien's gaze stayed calm. Too calm. "I make it my business to know who scares you." Every instinct in my body told me to walk away. To leave the club alone. To call a cab and pretend this entire night never happened. But then my phone buzzed again. Another text from Tyler lighting up the screen beside my trembling hands. I saw Damien notice the fear on my face before I even touched the phone. His expression darkened slightly. Not anger. Something colder. More protective. He extended his hand toward me again. Come home safely tonight, Claire. And for reasons I could not explain even to myself. I placed my hand in his. The rain hit the black SUV in steady waves as Marco opened the passenger door for me outside the nightclub. Cold wind swept through Lexington Avenue carrying the scent of wet pavement and city smoke while traffic lights reflected across the slick streets like broken ribbons of color. I stood frozen on the sidewalk for half a second, suddenly aware of how insane this looked. Me. A freelance photographer from Brooklyn climbing into a luxury SUV with a man everyone in Manhattan seemed terrified of. Damien waited beside the open door without rushing me. No pressure. No impatience. Just quiet expectation beneath the glow of the streetlights. You can still say no, he said softly. The strange thing was, I knew he meant it. Tyler never meant it when he said things like that. There had always been consequences attached. Sulking. Anger. Silence that lasted days. But Damien looked at me like my choice actually belonged to me. That alone felt dangerously addictive. I slid into the SUV before I could overthink it. The interior smelled faintly of leather and cedarwood. Warm. Quiet. Safe in a way that felt almost unreal after the noise inside the club. Damien entered from the opposite side moments later while Marco took the driver's seat up front. The city blurred outside the tinted windows as the SUV pulled smoothly into traffic. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Rain drummed softly overhead while jazz played low through hidden speakers somewhere inside the vehicle. I stared out at Manhattan passing by in silver reflections. Late-night diners glowing beneath neon signs. Steam rising from subway grates. Couples hurrying beneath umbrellas across crowded sidewalks. Normal people living normal lives while I sat beside a man who looked like he belonged in headlines instead of reality. You are overthinking, Damien said quietly beside me. I let out a nervous breath. You can tell. You bite the inside of your cheek when you are anxious. My eyes widened slightly. That is creepy. A faint smile touched his mouth again. Accurate though. I hated how quickly he noticed things about me. Hated even more that part of me liked being noticed at all. Do you study everyone this closely? I asked. No, the answer came immediately. Simple. Honest. Dangerous. I looked down at my hands resting tightly together in my lap. Tonight was supposed to be simple, I admitted quietly. A birthday party. Drinks with friends. Maybe dancing for an hour before editing photos all weekend. Damien watched me carefully. What kind of photography? Mostly engagements. Weddings. Events. You capture happy endings for a living. The softness in his voice caught me off guard. I guess so. And who captures yours? The question hit somewhere painfully deep before I could stop it. Because nobody had asked me that in a very long time. Tyler certainly never had. Tyler liked attention focused entirely on him. His career. His problems. His moods. I spent 2 years shrinking myself around someone else's chaos until I barely recognized my own reflection anymore. Claire. Damien's voice pulled me back gently. I realized I had gone quiet too long. Sorry, I whispered automatically. His expression darkened slightly at the apology. There it is again. What? You apologize every time you drift into your own thoughts. Heat rushed into my face. You really do notice everything. Only with you. The word settled heavily inside the quiet SUV while rain streaked down the windows around us. My pulse stumbled again. Outside, traffic slowed near Midtown as red brake lights painted the interior in soft crimson flashes. Marco adjusted the mirror slightly up front before speaking carefully. Sir. Damien's eyes lifted immediately. What is it? The gray BMW has been behind us since 47th Street. Cold spread instantly through my stomach. Because Tyler drove a gray BMW. Damien turned slowly toward the back window, his expression unreadable beneath the passing city lights. Then his hand moved calmly over mine, resting against the leather seat beside him. Warm. Steady. Protective. Do not panic, he said softly. You are safe with me. And somehow. I believed him. My heartbeat became painfully loud inside the quiet SUV. Rain blurred the traffic behind us into streaks of white headlights and red brake lights, but I could still make out the shape of the gray BMW several cars back. Tyler. Of course it was Tyler. My fingers curled tighter instinctively against the leather seat until Damien's thumb brushed lightly across my knuckles once. Small movement. Barely noticeable. Yet somehow it steadied me more than words could have. How long has he been there? Damien asked calmly. Marco checked the mirror again. Since we left the club. Damien nodded once, like that confirmed something he already suspected. No anger. No panic. Just calculation settling behind those dark eyes. Claire, he said softly beside me, has he ever followed you before tonight? I swallowed hard. A few times after the breakup. Saying it out loud made it sound worse somehow. More real. Damien's jaw tightened almost invisibly. And you did not report it? A humorless laugh escaped me. To who? The police would just call it relationship drama. Silence filled the SUV after that. Heavy silence. The kind that made me realize he was thinking carefully about every word I had just said. Outside, the rain intensified, pounding harder against the windows while midtown traffic slowed near an intersection glowing red beneath streetlights. The BMW stayed behind us. Steady. Watching. Damien finally leaned back. Slightly against the seat, his expression unreadable again. You spent too much time learning how to survive someone else's instability. The accuracy of that statement made my chest ache unexpectedly. You say things like you already know me. I know fear when I see it. His voice dropped quieter. Especially in women who have been taught to apologize for it. I looked down immediately because suddenly my eyes burned in the worst possible way. Nobody had ever described it like that before. Not my friends. Not my family. Not even me. Tyler always made me feel irrational for being nervous around him. Damien looked at my fear like it was evidence instead of weakness. The SUV turned onto a quieter avenue lined with dark office buildings and glowing hotel entrances. Fewer cars now. Fewer people. My stomach tightened again when the BMW followed the turn without hesitation. Marco's voice remained calm from the front seat. Still behind us. Damien's hand left mine only long enough to adjust the cuff of his black shirt before resting near me again. Controlled. Patient. But I noticed something now that I had missed earlier. The entire atmosphere inside the SUV changed whenever Damien went quiet for too long. Marco sat straighter. The security vehicle behind us moved closer. Even the air felt sharper somehow. Damien, I whispered carefully, who are you really? He looked out the rain-streaked window for a long moment before answering. Someone men like Tyler do not challenge twice. Not a real answer. But something in his tone made cold slide down my spine anyway. My phone suddenly lit up again in my lap. Incoming call. Tyler. I froze instantly. Damien glanced down at the screen once. Do not answer it. The call continued vibrating loudly between us while rain battered the city outside. I watched Tyler's name flash across the screen over and over until my anxiety twisted painfully beneath my ribs. Damien noticed immediately. Of course he did. Claire. His voice softened slightly. Look at me. I did. You are not responsible for managing his emotions anymore. The call stopped. 1 second later, another message appeared. I saw Damien read the preview notification at the same time I did. You really think he can keep you safe from me? The temperature inside the SUV suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Marco cursed quietly under his breath up front while headlights from the BMW moved closer behind us. Damien stared at the message for one long second before reaching for his phone calmly. Marco, he said quietly, change the route. Yes, sir. My pulse stumbled. What does that mean? Damien's eyes lifted slowly to mine. Calm. Protective. Terrifyingly certain. It means, he said softly, your ex just made a very bad decision. The SUV accelerated smoothly through the rain while Manhattan blurred outside in streaks of silver and red. My pulse refused to slow down. Every time I looked through the back window, the gray BMW was still there. Closer now. Too close. Marco turned sharply onto a quieter side street lined with dark brick buildings and glowing apartment windows. Tires hissed softly against wet pavement while thunder rolled somewhere above the skyline. Damien, I whispered carefully, I do not want trouble. His gaze shifted toward me immediately. Calm. Steady. You are not the one creating it. The certainty in his voice should have comforted me. Instead, it made everything feel more serious somehow. Because Damien did not sound worried. He sounded prepared. The SUV slowed briefly at a red light, and my stomach twisted painfully when the BMW stopped 2 cars behind us. Waiting. Watching. My phone buzzed again in my lap. Another message from Tyler. You are making a mistake. Damien's eyes lowered toward the screen before lifting back to mine. He is trying to scare you. It is working. The honesty slipped out before I could hide it. Damien leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice until it wrapped around the panic clawing at my chest. Claire. I forced myself to look at him. Fear is not weakness. The words hit me unexpectedly hard. Because Tyler used to mock me any time I admitted being afraid of anything. Crowded streets. Late-night subway rides. Loud arguments. Even thunderstorms sometimes. Everything became evidence that I was too emotional. Too sensitive. Too difficult. But Damien looked at my fear like it deserved. Protection instead of ridicule. The light changed green. Marco drove forward immediately while the security SUV behind us shifted lanes smoothly. Professional. Coordinated. My breathing turned shallow. You really are important, aren't you? I asked quietly. Damien's expression barely changed. Important enough that people around me stay alert. That is not a normal answer. A faint shadow of amusement touched his face again. Neither is tonight. Rain hammered harder against the windows now, turning the streets nearly empty as midnight crept closer. I watched Damien carefully beneath the dim interior lights. Every movement he made looked controlled. Intentional. The kind of control people only develop after surviving chaos for a very long time. My chest tightened unexpectedly at the thought. Does it ever get exhausting? I asked softly. His eyes shifted toward me. What? Everyone fearing you. Silence stretched between us while the city passed outside in blurred reflections. Damien looked out the window for several seconds before answering quietly. Fear keeps people honest. And lonely. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. That tiny reaction told me more than words could have. Before either of us spoke again, Marco's voice cut carefully through the silence. Sir. Damien looked forward immediately. What is it? The BMW just turned off. My body reacted before my mind did. I twisted quickly toward the back window. Empty street. No headlights behind us anymore. Relief crashed through me so suddenly it almost hurt. Maybe he finally gave up, I whispered hopefully. But Marco did not look convinced. Neither did Damien. The SUV continued another 2 blocks before pulling beneath the covered entrance of my apartment building in Brooklyn Heights. Rain poured heavily beyond the awning while warm yellow lights glowed from the lobby windows ahead. Home. Finally. My shoulders loosened for the first time all night. Marco stepped out first with an umbrella while Damien remained beside me inside the SUV. Neither of us moved immediately. The quiet between us felt different now. Softer somehow. More dangerous because of it. Thank you, I whispered sincerely. You did not have to do any of this. Damien watched me carefully in the dim light. Yes, he said quietly. I did. My pulse stumbled again. Before I could answer, headlights suddenly reflected sharply across the wet pavement outside. Fast. Too fast. Marco turned instantly toward the street while one of the security men reached for his earpiece. My stomach dropped. Because the gray BMW had just appeared at the corner again. And this time, Tyler was getting out of the car. Everything inside me turned cold the second Tyler slammed his car door shut beneath the rain. Water soaked through his gray jacket almost instantly while headlights reflected across the wet pavement around him in harsh streaks of white and silver. He looked furious. Desperate too. The kind of desperation that comes from realizing control is slipping away. Marco moved immediately, stepping between the SUV and the sidewalk while the other security men shifted into position without saying a word. Quiet. Professional. Like they had done this 100 times before. Damien remained perfectly still beside me inside the vehicle. That somehow frightened me more than if he had shouted. Stay here, he said softly. Damien, Claire. His voice dropped lower. Gentler somehow. Trust me. The same dangerous warmth hit my chest again. Outside, Tyler was already yelling something through the rain, but the sound barely reached us through the closed doors and pounding storm overhead. His movements looked frantic now. Angry gestures cutting through the downpour while Marco calmly blocked his path toward the SUV entrance. My pulse climbed painfully higher. I should talk to him, I whispered. Damien turned toward me slowly. No, maybe if I explain, you already explained when you left him. The certainty in his voice silenced me instantly. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Tyler never wanted explanations. He wanted access. Control. Another chance to pull me back into apologizing for things that were never my fault to begin with. Damien watched my face carefully before speaking again. You are still trying to protect his feelings while he is standing outside your home trying to intimidate you. Hearing the truth spoken out loud felt like ice water against old wounds. Outside, Tyler shoved a hand through his wet hair in frustration while one of the security men spoke quietly into an earpiece. Cars passed slowly through the rain nearby, their headlights briefly illuminating the scene before disappearing into the night again. Brooklyn suddenly felt very small. Very exposed. Damien reached for the door handle calmly. Panic flared instantly inside my chest. My fingers caught his sleeve before I could stop myself. He looked down at my hand resting against the black fabric of his jacket. Then back at me. Do not go out there, I whispered. The expression in his eyes changed slightly. Softer. Warmer. Like my fear for him mattered more than Tyler standing in the storm outside. Claire, he said quietly, I am not the one in danger here. Before I could answer, Damien stepped out into the rain. Cold wind rushed briefly into the SUV before the door shut behind him again. I watched through the tinted glass while thunder rolled overhead. Damien moved across the wet pavement with terrifying calm, black coat darkened by rain while Tyler continued talking loudly enough that nearby pedestrians started glancing over nervously. But the moment Damien stopped in front of him, Tyler went quiet. Completely quiet. Even from inside the SUV, I could see the change instantly. The anger draining out of him. The confidence disappearing beneath whatever Damien said next. Because Damien never raised his voice. He did not need to. Marco remained nearby beneath an umbrella while rain poured heavily around all three men under the glowing apartment lights. I could not hear the conversation. But I saw Tyler's face pale. Saw him glance toward the SUV where I sat watching. Saw him take one slow step backward afterward. Then another. Damien stood perfectly still through all of it. Calm. Controlled. Untouchable. Minutes later, Tyler finally looked away first. He turned silently and walked back toward the gray BMW without another word. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. Damien watched the car disappear down the street before returning to the SUV through the rain. When he slid back into the seat beside me, droplets of water clung to his dark hair and the sharp line of his jaw. "What did you say to him?" I whispered. Damien looked at me for one long quiet moment while thunder softened in the distance beyond Brooklyn rooftops. Then his hand lifted gently toward my face, brushing one rain-cold strand of hair behind my ear with impossible tenderness. "Enough," he said softly. My heartbeat stumbled again beneath the warmth in his eyes. Because for the first time in 2 years, I finally understood what safety felt like.